Hey folks, Sean here, and in this episode, I want to encourage you to definitely not build in a vacuum. By that, what I mean is I often connect with early stage B2B SaaS founders and find out that they've been building their product pretty much alone, oftentimes for a scary amount of time. Now, this might be months to years in some cases. There's some folks that I've helped essentially turn around their efforts or start making a lot more progress that have been working on their product maybe nights and weekends or sometimes even full time for multiple years without really any feedback from anyone, which is crazy for me to think about. Now, this really falls into that trap of kind of being afraid of sharing your product with anybody because of the feedback that you might get. It's kind of like the perfectionist trap. Is if you've ever heard anybody refer to something along the lines of perfection is the enemy of good or perfection is the enemy of great. That's kind of what they mean. Is if you're constantly working on making your product perfect, it's never going to get there because it's an unattainable goal. So I want to help you overcome this for anybody that might be in this situation, right? I am a huge advocate for building in public, number one, which is really what I'm doing with you. I'm sharing with you everything that I'm doing with regard to the software projects that I'm building and trying to keep you posted along the way. Here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm not, here's why, that kind of stuff. Huge advocate of that. And all of the things people worry about doing something like that, I think are often not really met with kind of the realistic concerns that they have about them. Oftentimes that most of that ends up being overblown. Now, today, specifically what I want to talk about is getting the kind of feedback that you might be interested in terms of the usability of your product. So I talk a lot about making sure whether or not there's a customer base, you've got an adequate business model, you can generate a positive return for what it is you're working on. All of those are very important. But what about when it comes to the usability of your product? As in, how well does it work? That is something that I often leave to the market to determine. I will, because I have some experience as an engineer and a UX professional, I will use it myself, design it in as simplest the way possible I feel like I can, and then open it up to the world, largely as soon as I can. However, if you want someone to take a deeper dive, I would encourage you to look to your network. More than likely, there are folks that you're connected with or that you know who are more than willing, sometimes like outright happy, to be involved in this process in terms of testing your software, especially if you're working on something cool. Now, something I'm working on now, one of my next projects that I don't know if I've shared with you yet or not, is I'm working on the ability to turn long form video into short form clips because that's that's a huge push at the moment everywhere. And there's a bunch of companies and products out there trying to solve something similar, but I've got some specific use cases that I'm particularly interested in, which I'll be sharing more of those details with you as this project evolves. But the point here is that someone in my network that I reached out to, I shared with them, hey, here's where this product that does so and so is at the moment. Would you be interested in giving it a shot and sharing with me your feedback? They took it in less than a day. They tore it apart, which is amazing. They used all the features. They gave me a ton of feedback, most of which I didn't ask for in the detail that they provided, but was perfect for me to leverage in terms of figuring out what's someone else's take on using this thing. Because what you might not realize over time is that if you're the one spending the most or all of the time with your product, you're not really getting a good sample size for how everybody else feels in terms of how well it works, right? Your standards may be too high, your standards may be too low. They may not really adequately match a good sample size for what the market might deem as acceptable in terms of the usability for your product. So the point here is that get your product out there as soon as possible, number one. Number two, look to your network to do some extensive testing for your product even before you launch. And that's kind of where this product is for me. Getting ready to launch it, but a couple of passes through folks in my network have been providing some really great feedback. And now I can incorporate that back into the product before I launch, enabling me to skip a couple of steps.